Chicago Bears fans, let's go. I've been hard at work at narrowing down the Bears' options for pick number 10 in next month's draft. This process dates all the way back to last season when I watched college football all year long, covered the Senior Bowl and the NFL Draft Combine, and now that the first wave of free agency is over, I believe we can narrow down the Bears' options in the NFL Draft. I'm hoping to have the list narrowed down to my final four prospects soon, but this year's draft is even harder than ever to decipher with so much uncertainty at the top. The first thing I want to talk about is I believe there are two players who should be no brainer picks if somehow they were still on the board at pick number 10, but I just do not see either one being a realistic option. Those two guys are Abdul Carter and Mason Graham. They are the two best players in the draft on defense, and the odds of them falling to us are slim to none. But if for some reason things went crazy and it happened, I would draft either guy without any hesitation. But for the most part, I'm doing this list assuming that neither one of those players will be on the board. And also, Travis Hunter will also be long gone as well. The list does contain some wild card players, guys like Ashton Genty and Tyler Warren, a couple of options on both the O line and the D line. It's focused heavily in the trenches still, with 12 of the 14 players coming from the O line or D line. However, it's time to narrow that list down. Talk about some of the guys who might move up the list and others who might not be options anymore after the Bears have attacked free agency. Let's go ahead and get right into it. First guy I wanted to talk about is Will Campbell, and his chances of sticking at left tackle might now be slim to none. However, his chances of being available at pick 10 might have skyrocketed. Does that put him on the Bears' radar? He was one of the most athletic players of all offensive linemen in Indy, scoring a 9.88 on his RAS score, and if his arms were just a half an inch longer, he'd probably be a top 5 pick and a left tackle in the NFL. But Campbell's short arms most likely force him inside to guard. It's just simply a fact that there is no left tackle in the entire NFL with arms as short as Will Campbell's. And it's not just his 32 and 5/8 inch arm lengths, it's also his wingspan. He doesn't have broad shoulders to make up for his short arms. His wingspan is only 77 inches, while Kelvin Banks Jr., who just has only half-inch longer arms, has a wingspan of 84 and 3/8 inches, a full 7-inch advantage in wingspan, and that's a guy who only has half-inch longer arms. So to me, Will Campbell is simply a guard in the NFL, but he headlines a special group of guards, and he puts the Bears in a position where if we want to stay on the O line, we could potentially draft the best guard of the entire draft, starting with Will Campbell, but also throwing in guys like Tyler Booker and Armand Mambu as well. But after the moves that we've taken place in free agency, I think taking a guard at pick 10 is most likely off the table. And that brings me to my next guy, Missouri's Armand Mambu, potentially one of my favorite offensive line prospects. He played right tackle in college, but early on I thought he would make a great fit for the Bears. We could bring him in, move him inside to right guard, let him develop between Darnell Wright and Drew Dahlman. But after the contract extension of Jonah Jackson, I just don't know how much sense this one makes. So while I won't rule out Mimbu completely, I think it's unlikely we take a guard or even a right tackle at pick 10 unless the Bears think Armand Mimbu is an option at left tackle. And that brings me to the next guy on my list, potentially the one guy who is still an option on the offensive line. And honestly, I believe even this one is very unlikely. That guy is Ohio State's Josh Simmons, the best left tackle in this year's draft. I think he's head and shoulders a better prospect than Kelvin Banks Jr. When I watch the Texas's left tackle, I just don't think his tape is good enough, and I see him sliding a bit in the draft. But if Josh Simmons proves he's healthy at his pro day, there's a legit chance that he could even go in the top 5, but he has a chance for sure of going in the top 10. For the Bears, though, again, this is where it gets tricky. I don't know how much sense it makes. We already have Braxton Jones, who's recovering from an ankle injury, and Karan Amagaji, who's missed most of the last 2 seasons with a torn quad. Do we really want to draft another injured left tackle? Probably not. But we do have a long-term issue at left tackle. I don't think we want to pay Braxton Jones $25 million a year next season, but we do have to see what we have in Karan Amagaji before spending another top 10 pick at the position. This doesn't rule us out from taking another tackle on day 2 or day 3 of the draft, but taking a guy at pick 10 before we even see what we have in Karan Amagaji, again, it's a move I might question. But considering how talented Simmons is, I cannot rule this one out either. But there's also another guy who was very high on my prospects list who has completely fallen off. Alabama's Tyler Booker. And look, I love the player. I think he's a first round talent. I think he's an absolute pancake machine. But after testing poorly at the combine, I think his chances of going in the top 15 are all but eliminated in this year's draft. With Will Campbell now being a guard, Armand Mimbu potentially being seen as a guard as well, and the amount of players that really stood out at the combine, I think Tyler Booker is probably going to slide in the draft a bit. I think he's probably going to go late first round, but there's even a chance that Tyler Booker falls to round 2, and he's still a favorite of mine. So if he's on the board in round 2, I would love it if the Bears drafted him. Then you could still let him learn behind Jonah Jackson, and he would greatly improve the depth on this O line. But I don't see him as an option at pick 10 anymore. And to me, what might actually make the most sense is finding the best player on the defensive line. Finding whoever you think is the most talented pass rusher, whether it's a defensive end or a defensive tackle, identify that guy and take him at pick 10. I think there's 4 players right now that stand out to me. The first one I want to talk about is a guy that's emerging as a favorite of mine, Georgia's Mykel Williams. He played through an ankle injury all season long, and he still put out quality tape. But judging him solely on what he put out in 2024 is not fair. And anyone who thinks we should draft Kelvin Banks Jr., go watch Texas versus Georgia and watch Mykel Williams destroy the Texas offensive lineman. He is an absolute game changer. And when he's 100% healthy, a guy who profiles as potentially a top 5 pick. He also proved how tough he was this season. His 2023 tape shows an explosive edge rusher who looks like an impact player in the NFL. Right now, Mykel Williams profiles as one of my favorites to be picked by the Bears at pick number 10 in the draft. But the next edge rusher that I really like, another guy who's been a favorite of mine for more than 2 years now, is James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. This is a pass rusher with all of the traits of a 12 plus sack a season guy in the NFL. He had 17 and a half sacks over the last 2 seasons, and he showcased his athleticism at the combine, looking like a freak edge rusher, scoring a 9.34 on the RAS. But on top of that, his production as a pass rusher has been legit. He has the second highest pass rush win grade since 2017, behind only Nick Bosa. The top 5 of this list is extremely impressive. It's Nick Bosa, James Pierce Jr., Abdul Carter, and that's followed by 2 of last year's rookies, Jared Verse and Liatu Latu. But there's also some more extremely talented guys found in the top 10. Mike Green, Myles Garrett, and Micah Parsons. To put it quite simply, James Pierce Jr. is a stud edge rusher. He fits the mold of a Dennis Allen, Ryan Poles type. His biggest question mark right now are off the field concerns. And to me, I only judge the player I see on film. It's up to Ryan Poles to make those kind of decisions. And from everything I've seen, James Pierce Jr. seems like a really likable dude. The only thing I've read is that he didn't like doing media interviews in college, and some rumors of him having a bad attitude. But to me, he's an early favorite to be a Chicago Bear. But I also believe there are 2 defensive tackles who could potentially be in play as well. Both of these guys are so fun to watch on film. Ole Miss's Walter Nolan and Michigan's Kenneth Grant. These guys offer 2 different play styles, with Walter Nolan being a disruptive 3-tech type who loves to get after quarterbacks and disrupt the backfield. Meanwhile, Kenneth Grant is more of a space eater, kind of like an athletic freak version of Andrew Billings. He's a nose tackle who's capable of developing as a pass rusher. I think after signing Grady Jarrett and the rest of the moves we made in free agency, Kenneth Grant is probably a better fit than Walter Nolan. So I have Kenneth Grant rising up my draft boards, and I have Walter Nolan moving down slightly. I still can't eliminate Walter Nolan because he is a guy who could learn behind Grady Jarrett if the Bears viewed him as a long term option at 3 tech and if they wanted to move Gervon Dexter back to the nose position. But all four of those guys on the defensive line make perfect sense and have to be viewed as legit options. But there is a legit wild card on the defensive line as well. Another guy that I have to talk about, a guy who could actually replace Tremaine Edmonds on early downs and then get after the quarterback in passing situations. When I watch tape of Georgia's Jalen Walker, it's hard to not see flashes of Micah Parsons. I just honestly have no idea how most defensive coordinators view this guy. I wish I could interview Dennis Allen about Jalen Walker. He's an X factor. He's a guy who can wreak havoc and be a stud in the NFL. I just don't know how he fits the Bears defense. But right now, nobody's really talking about this guy, and he's someone to at least be familiar with. Watch out for Jalen Walker. Some teams view him as an outside linebacker, and he's probably too undersized to be an every down edge rusher, but he is a difference maker when getting after quarterbacks on third down, and he's a guy who can be a chess piece in Dennis Allen's defense if the fit is right. Two other defensive linemen I have to mention are Mike Green and Shamar Stewart. They're sleepers, and there's so much talent on this defensive line that the Bears can really pick their favorite at the position. I just have Pierce and Williams rated slightly higher, and I think they're better fits for the Chicago Bears. Mike Green is not only undersized, but he also has some legit off the field concerns. And meanwhile, Shamar Stewart's lack of production makes him a huge risk in the top 10. If we were to trade down a little bit, I definitely would not be against taking Shamar Stewart. But after Ryan Poles majorly upgraded the trenches on both sides of the ball, could the Bears be thinking of going outside of the offensive or defensive line? What if Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, was available at pick 10? A stud prospect who the Bears could deploy in 12 personnel packages, having both Cole Kmet and Warren on the field. Daniel Jeremiah said we'd have the best 12 personnel in the NFL. But he's a guy who could be a legit chess piece and a weapon on offense. Ben Johnson loved running multiple variations of formations and using bigger personnel in Detroit. So while he is tearing his playbook down to the shreds, there are tendencies and things that coaches like and preferences that they have when building an offense. So while tight end is not a huge need for the Bears right now, if Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles both think that Tyler Warren is a top 5 player in this draft, I can't rule him out as a guy at pick 10 either. And that's one of my biggest points here. I initially planned on narrowing this list down to just 4 or 5 players. I thought free agency would really help us narrow the list down and find out who Ryan Poles is targeting, like it has in the 2 previous off seasons. However, things are different this year, and Ryan Poles still has ultimate flexibility in round 1. I think there are still some needs on the roster that he has to fill on day 2 or 3 of the draft, but right now, when you're looking at pick 10, it's best player available. And if they view Tyler Warren as the ultimate chess piece, they can draft him. If they think Ashton Genty is the best player in the draft and will help out this offense, we can draft him. But even if they want to take a crazy player like Jahad Campbell, the best linebacker in the draft, they could do that as well. That's the amount of flexibility the Bears have heading into the draft. They could also go left tackle, guard, or even defensive line. The couple positions I do not see us even considering are cornerback, wide receiver, and quarterback. But even cornerback, you can make an argument for it. I think Tyreek Stevenson is a sleeper, and we also have Terrell Smith, Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson. But if they view Will Johnson, one of the best corners in the draft, as a lockdown corner and a guy who can shut down receivers opposite of JJ, and maybe then they could even move Tyreek Stevenson to safety, I can't completely rule it out. Whatever Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson want, that's what Ryan Poles should do. Pretty much the entire board is open. We're not taking a quarterback and we're not taking a wide receiver, but pretty much everything else should be on the board. Depending on who the Bears have as their highest rated player when we get on the board at pick 10, that's who we should draft. And another player I wanted to talk about here, Alabama's Jahad Campbell. He is a special talent, but I think linebackers are even less important than running backs, and another position I don't like taking in the first round. But it's no secret that Tremaine Edmonds has underperformed during his time in Chicago. On top of that, we don't know how Dennis Allen views him, and his production simply does not match his salary cap hit. But I do believe that with the additions on the defensive line, and if we add even more talent to the D line in the draft, I think Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards are going to play a lot better football in Dennis Allen's defense. Upgrading the defensive line was a huge need, and Grady Jarrett already changes how teams are going to play us. And another point here, we're kind of stuck with Tremaine Edmonds for one more year. It's kind of similar to how Nate Davis's contract was last year. Unless he restructures, he's going to be here one more year, but we can get out of his contract next year. So if the Bears find a linebacker they really like in this draft, it's another option you can't rule out. We can move on from Tremaine next season and save roughly $15 million in cap space. I really couldn't argue against that either. And some scouts project Jahad Campbell as a difference maker in the NFL, kind of similar to how I talked about Jalen Walker earlier. He's a guy who could play linebacker on rundowns and then even blitz or transition to be an edge rusher on passing downs. I think both Jahad Campbell and Jalen Walker could be surprise options in the first round of this draft. If you would have asked me a week ago, I would have said no chance we take one of those guys. We have to focus on getting bigger in the trenches. And I want to be clear, Ryan Poles' work in the trenches is not done yet, but he did give himself the flexibility to take the best player available in round one. And even though both Jahad Campbell and Jalen Walker are listed as linebackers, they are guys that are also could profile as edge rushers in the NFL. Right now, they're just kind of used as chess pieces on defense. They move around, usually play linebacker early on, and then go get after the quarterback on third downs. But the main point is that Ryan Poles can go with the best player available in round one and then fill out the rest of our needs later in the draft. Which brings me to the guy that everyone is talking about, Ashton Jeanty. To me, he's easily the best running back to come out since Bijan Robinson. He's up there in a class with Saquon Barkley, and he's easily a top 5 player in this year's draft. If the Bears end up drafting Ashton Jeanty, I will love the pick, and I'll probably buy a jersey day one. I think Jeanty would help this offense out in a major way, and he would really take pressure off of Caleb Williams and help out the offensive line as well. What's a better way to help your offensive line than having a running back that defensive ends have to account for? Ashton Jeanty would help out the O-line and Caleb Williams. But let's just take a look at this chart. The grades out running backs coming out of college, and it's clear Ashton Jeanty stands out. He is simply a special football player. But there are two major reasons why I'm not fully on board the Ashton Jeanty hype train just yet. I do think people talk about this too much, drafting a running back in the first round. And yes, typically I don't think it's great for value unless the player is special. And also, it depends on the draft board that year. But you can't talk about running backs this season without mentioning how talented of a class it is. And I've always been a value based drafter. I've always believed in taking the best player available. And right now, taking the best pass rusher on the board and then pairing him with a top running back on day two might be the best way to upgrade the entire roster. But it's impossible to know how the board is going to fall and what running backs or pass rushers will be there in day two. I've already played that game the other day. Go ahead and pick your combination of running back on day one, pass rusher day two, or pass rusher day one and running back day two, and I honestly don't know which is better. I do know that I'm a big fan of Ashton Jeanty, and I think it's unfair that the people that don't want to draft him are trying to tear him down and talk about how he's not a good running back. Look, there's a difference. If you don't want us to draft a running back, that's fine. But don't take away from the talented player that Ashton Genty is. That's what I take an issue with. I think Ashton Genty simply has the clearest path to be a Pro Bowl player in the right system as a rookie, and he should be the favorite to win the Rookie of the Year if we picked him. I do believe he's a difference maker, but I am torn heading into this draft. Another player we aren't even talking about is Omarion Hampton. What if Ashton Genty comes off the board in the first 5 or 6 picks? And what if the Bears either took Omarion Hampton at 10 or traded down and still went with the second best running back? That's the same thing the Lions did when they took Jahmyr Gibbs. They had a chance to take Bijan Robinson, but they traded down and landed Jahmyr Gibbs at pick 12. But it's kind of crazy that just over a month before the draft, and everyone is having such a difficult time narrowing down the Bears' choices. But these are an early look at my favorites for the Chicago Bears to land in the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft. Just over a month away, and I've put a ton of work into this, guys. Ton of time watching tape, reading scouting reports, watching tape on Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit, watching tape on Dennis Allen's defenses in New Orleans, and overall trying to figure out how the Chicago Bears are going to look this season. Let me know who your favorites are for pick 10. As always, let's keep it friendly in the comments. I appreciate everyone who watches. Please remember to hit that like button for me. I put a ton of work into this one. Stay tuned, guys, because I have a ton more on the way. And until next time, bear down.